Hello dear students, you're watching Teach Me Hannah channel and I'm Hannah. Today I have prepared an even more challenging exercise for you. I decided to include it in the course because I have never met a student who didn't make any mistakes in this exercise. I decided to make it even more difficult for you and I removed any information about the tenses that should be used in this exercise. To decide on the tenses that have to be put in the gaps, start reading the story. As you see, the story is about some past events. As you learned from one of my previous lessons, a story in the past is called a narration, which means that you have to use only past tenses, or in other words, they're called narrative tenses. Present tenses, like the present perfect continuous or present perfect, are not used when you are telling a story about past events. And before we start filling in the gaps, let's do a quick revision of all the narrative tenses we know. As you see, there is a dividing line. In this part of the board, I've put all the tense forms which describe states, single and repetitive actions. In this part of the board, you can see the narrative tenses which describe processes and prolonged actions. Now your task is to look at these timelines and to recognize these tense forms. On the first timeline, you could see actions which happen one after another. He came home, he had his dinner, he read a book, he went to bed. This tense also describes some regular actions in the past. Last year, I went jogging every day. When he told me about his trip, I wanted to travel to Alaska too. I wanted is another state, or it was a wonderful day. Was is a state. This is the past simple tense. This tense describes actions which had happened before other actions in the past, and it is the past perfect tense. For example, he came home, he wanted to open the door, and he realized that he had left his keys at the office. The past perfect is used to make it clear that some actions had happened before other actions in the past. The past perfect also describes a state that had lasted for some time before another moment in the past or another action. For example, before they got married, this is this action, they had known each other for 2 years. Know is considered to be a stative verb. Now let's move on to these two tenses. They both describe processes and prolonged actions. The first one is the past continuous tense. This tense is used to describe a process in the past which was happening when another action interrupted it. When he was reading a book, his friend called him. It is also used to describe a setting for other shorter actions. For example, it was a wonderful, pleasant, sunny day and we were walking in the park. Suddenly, I noticed a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for a long time. So I said that it was a sunny day and we were walking in the park to provide the setting for other shorter actions. Suddenly I noticed a friend who I hadn't seen for a while. We had a chat and the friend told me that, and other things probably happened afterwards. And the last one is the past perfect continuous tense. It describes a process which had been happening for some time before another action interrupted it, and we mention for how long it had been happening. For example, he had been reading that book for 20 minutes when a friend called him. Now let's move on to the exercise. It was 9:30 and Adam sat in a restaurant waiting for Rose to arrive. If we say sat, it would mean a short action. Just sat for a while and went away. But this action creates a setting for other shorter actions. That means that when actually he was sitting and waiting, other shorter events happened. Was sitting. At that time when he was sitting, he was tired. Why was he tired? He was tired because before that, he had been working all day. It's a process which had happened before other actions before he was sitting in the restaurant and before he was tired. And this process lasted for some time. We mentioned for how long. He had been working all day. If you say he was tired because he worked all day, if you use the past simple, it would mean that he was tired. First he was tired, and after that he worked all day, which makes no sense. He feel nervous too. I have to remind you that the word feel is an exception to the rules of stative verbs, as it can be interpreted as a state and as an action. For this reason, you can use both the past simple and the past continuous. So we can say he was feeling tired at that time, or he felt tired to describe the state he was in. If you look at the timeline, you will see how all these processes and states happened at the same time. He was sitting at the restaurant, and at the same time he was tired and he felt nervous or was feeling nervous. And at the same time he wasn't sure, so that's another state of his mind. He wasn't sure she would recognize him after all these years, so probably he hadn't seen her for many years. It was difficult to believe that they not see each other for 10 years now. If you say that it was difficult to believe that they didn't see each other for 10 years, it would mean that it was difficult to believe at that time that they didn't see each other later. The same mistake as with the word worked. It didn't happen later. It was difficult to believe that they hadn't seen each other for so long before the time when he was sitting at the restaurant and waiting for her. Before that moment, they hadn't met for 10 years. And we have here a period of time, so that's a state that had happened before other actions. He wondered if she changed much. Let's put it in the past simple. He wondered if she changed much. It would mean that he wondered, as he was sitting at the restaurant at 9:30, if she changed after 9 p.m. that evening. That wasn't the question that bothered him. He wondered if she had changed before he arrived at the restaurant, like by that time, if she had started to look different. 10 years is a long time. 10 years before, because if you say she was attractive, it would mean that as he was sitting at the restaurant, that evening she was attractive, but we don't know yet whether she was or not. 10 years before these events happened, she had been attractive. Again, we are talking about a past action that had happened before other past actions. 10 years before. He looked, obviously, he looked at his watch again. It happened after other actions. He waited for half an hour. At that point, when he looked, he realized that he had already been waiting for her for half an hour. We mentioned for how long this action had been happening before he looked at the watch. If you say that she promised to be there at about 9, it would mean that after he looked at his watch, he called her and she made this promise. That's not how it happened. What is meant here is that before Adam arrived at the restaurant, they had arranged that they would meet at the restaurant at 9. That's what she had promised before he came there. She never be a punctual person. The word never means a period of time. For example, I've never been a punctual person, John said. On a timeline, it will look like this. So they met, and since that time up to the time when he was waiting for her at the restaurant, she had never been a very punctual person. If you remove the word never from the sentence, you will have just a sentence in the past simple. For example, he knew that she wasn't a punctual person. It would be just her characteristic as a person. But if you add the period of time never before, you need the past perfect, which in this case describes a state which had lasted for some period of time before other actions. I hope that you have coped with this exercise and that you don't have any difficulty understanding how to use these tenses correctly. If you have a grammar exercise on tenses that you want to have explained, please let me know. I will shoot another video for you.